Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 7, Episode 5, Chrysalis. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great, we're awesome, we are a good time, and I think that you will really enjoy what we contribute here to this 30-year-old show that we continue to discuss week after week until we run out and then just go back to the land of obscurity where we came from. Um, Yes, as David said, tonight we are talking about the episode Chrysalis. But before we get into that, as always, like to do a quick check-in since it's been about a week since we last spoke to each other. So, David, how has your week been?
Week's been fine. It's been complicated by the fact that my phone is a problem. I tried switching carriers, and apparently a part of the process is getting the carrier unlock part done, and my phone still says it's carrier locked, and I can't get it to unlock, even though I've called my former carrier multiple times, and they're basically to the point of saying you have to like factory reset your phone to get it to unlock itself, basically. So I have a phone that doesn't work properly. It's a glorified iPod at this point.
So you're going from what to what? From what carrier to
Spectrum
which?
Mobile. So when me and my roommate moved into the house we're in now, I was in charge of the internet as a part of the agreement amongst us. And while I was getting the internet switched over, the guy was like, "Well, hey, how about we get you on our mobile plan? We'll get you a new phone because I had an iPhone 8 at the time, so I was a bit outdated." And they're like, "Yeah, we'll get you a new phone and get the whole thing wrapped up." I was like, you know what, that sounds great. Let's do it. But we decided recently to switch over to Google Fiber because they're here in Austin and the guys keep coming around. And Spectrum had like a almost a full day long outage like 2 weeks ago. So we're like, all right, we'll switch over to Google Fiber. And I figured that as a part of canceling the internet, I'd cancel my mobile service. And my roommate uses Mint Mobile, the Ryan Reynolds
Mhm.
plan, and he would get he would get some sort of promotion for himself. I would get a slightly cheaper rate, but also more data for that cheaper rate. It's like that's an easy win. Uh, but I did that Tuesday night, and the carrier you have has to send you a code that allows you to move your phone over, and I did all that, but then the new service couldn't implement the eSIM, the electronic signature card bit, and it just won't download. And the phone still says that it's locked, it has a carrier lock on it. Carrier lock or some other special block. And I'm not sure if it's carrier lock now or the other thing. Every single morning before work, I was in contact with Spectrum, being like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, we did it. We've unlocked it. And I'm like, my phone doesn't say it's unlocked. Y'all got to do something else. And eventually we're like, well, then you're going to have to try the full on factory reset, which means I'm going to have to download all of my data from my phone to my computer so that I can have it ready for, reloading it up on the phone, which is going to be a process in of itself. So basically, I don't intend on doing that for a few days because I have work for the next few days, and I'd like to have access to the Apple Store in nearby. Like if I need to go stop at the Apple Store and get their input, I'll have their services available. So I think for the next few days, I'll put up with having a brick for a phone in order to make sure everything goes properly, rather than delete all my data on accident and be even worse off than I started.
You
So
should look at this as an opportunity to be unplugged, you know?
yeah, I thought of
Uh,
that. I was like,
just
there's
try your
some
best to put it in the most positive spin, and I mean,
yeah,
there's a particular
silver
freedom
lining.
you're gonna get to enjoy for these
Well,
X number of
the
days.
thing I love doing is, it takes me like 40 minutes to drive to where my store is. I'm not kidding. It's a good 35, 40 minutes, which is perfect in terms of a back and forth to like listen to podcasts. So I love listening to a good podcast, particularly the political podcasts I listen to. And that means that I've still listened to them at work as opposed to on the drive, but there's a part of me that's just like, ah, shake my fist like this was way more of a hassle it's turned out than I thought it would be. It was supposed to be a quick save some money, get some more gigs, and now I mean, it's funny. My roommate, he's such a nice guy. He feels bad, like it's his fault that everything went south. It's not your fault, bro. Like he's actually been really helpful in terms of suggesting how to maybe fix it. Um, but man, it's just been frustrating. It's just been like I still need to tell my boss that my phone's not working. I was hoping to have it solved and like my boss
Of
not have to
course.
worry about it. But at this point, it's like it's been almost a full week. If they need to contact me and my phone's not available, they'll be questioning. So anyway, yeah, so that was my week in that sense, but I did finish the Robert Morris book I mentioned. Robert Morris, the financier of the revolution, really good book. Uh, just really in depth book. Kind of dry in the sense that some of the details were like he really gets into the details of what he was doing. And part of the problem is that so much of what he was doing is it's money stuff. Like I'm not a money guy, and
Hmm.
so trying to make sure I understand what's going on is a little difficult. But the epilogue was really great because it talks about how historians have treated him over the years. Some people have really treated him negatively, as if he was, again, like I mentioned in the first time I brought up this book, he was using his private business to cover for public things, trying to get the country started and the finances of the country working. So some of his detractors say that it wasn't. Some people say he funded the revolution, and then his detractors say that the revolution funded him. This book made the case of the first part of like, no, he was a successful businessman before the revolution. He was working really hard to make things happen. He was having to use his personal reputation to back up the endeavors he was pursuing.
Okay. I
And
think I get what you're going at. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, but what's really interesting is that late in life he'd flown really high. Basically, the author makes the case of Icarus. He had flown so high that at the end of his life, he overextended himself. And he part of his problem was he got involved with shady characters. He just wasn't giving the attention he needed to give to his business contacts, and he ended up in debtor's prison near the end of his life. He lost
Well,
all of his money and lost his reputation, and that's part of the reason why he isn't treated as one of the main founding fathers is because he worked behind the scenes to start with, and then he also his reputation was pretty badly damaged late in life. But the book's case is that he deserves to be considered more than people give him credit for. He did a lot in his time, made some bad choices at the end of his life, and some things fell apart, and that cascaded and uh, caused him to go to debtor's prison. But that was not because he wasn't an evil guy trying to screw people over. He just overextended himself. He got too, eyes were too big for his mouth, or his mouth was too big for his stomach, whatever that saying is. Eyes were too big for his stomach, um, and got things out of hand. And
mhm.
anyway, great book. Really enjoyed it. And then Severance, the last episode of Severance season 2 comes out this week. I just was at my parents' place and watched the penultimate episode of season 2 with them. They're really got a great uh, climactic sort of feel with this season. You really feel like something's happening, and this last episode should be big. Looking forward to that. But yeah, that was my week. How much? Excuse me. How was yours?
Well, we, kind of went on with the birthday celebrations. We kind of rounded things out. My aunt and uncle's birthday was today, as a matter of no, yesterday. I'm sorry, it was yesterday. So rounded everything out with them. So we have a little bit of a break. Well, I guess technically we're done because now everybody else who comes with their birthdays, they live further away. So there's like not a massive pressure of obligation to do a whole lot, for them. So I'm glad for that. Just send a card or a video or whatever it is. But other than that, work's been fine. Kid is fine. We started spring break, so now I have this newly minted 10-year-old running around and trying to figure out ways to keep her busy while I'm, working or doing whatever. I have been doing some home projects, and I've got to show you. I got a new kit. So, long time ago, I had started building the Enterprise, the die cast
Yes.
metal Enterprise. Okay,
Yes.
so that process I started, then I had to take like a super long break because the company that was doing it went belly up, and then we didn't know if it was ever going to be continued. And I was so upset because I was like, maybe I had less than a third of all the kits that I needed for the thing, you know.
Right.
So then another company picked it back up. I started getting kits again, but then they hit a pause, supply chain issues, whatever else. So that is supposed to be resuming. But in the meantime, I got sent a new kit for a model of uh, Deep Space Nine, and
Nice.
it's not in any like not a
Not to
large one, thank
scale.
God.
Yeah.
Right, not at all. um and it comes with a mini Defiant as well, that I can, like, once you build it, you can link to one of the docks and go
Nice.
from there. So now I've got these two model things to work on, and I have been uh putting up sword shelves because David, as you know, I have a batleth, so I need to hang that up. And then I got a couple of other things here that I found when I was, cleaning out the garage and stuff. We've been moving stuff around like crazy lately, typical spring cleaning stuff. So I'm kind of gonna make this like sword wall, and I'm gonna put all of these up. So it's just like I've been cracking up about it because I'm like, it's the quintessential single dude thing. My room, my home is slowly becoming like all these little like collections of um guy stuff,
That's all
Um
this right here, man.
yeah, and it just cracks me up because I was, like, I do stuff with my daughter all the time, and she's got her own style of stuff and everything else. But now we're, it's like you can walk through and see where our stuff clashes, right? So it just makes me laugh every time I see it. So, but now these, since they're weapons, are going to be in my room under my very watchful eye. That way I don't have to worry about her or somebody else coming in and wanting, oh, is it real? And then grabbing it and cutting themselves or any other nonsense going on.
Right.
So there is that. So yeah, lots of hands-on things for me to do, which means I'm gonna have to switch over to audiobook once again for things like The Expanse and continuing through that series. And I was going to check and see if the version of the Federalist Papers that I have is also available in audiobook. That way I can kind of just sit and immerse myself in all of my things and have it playing while I'm building, while I'm, putting all stuff together, and just have a grand old time. I also, uh, I, I'm something of a gamer enthusiast. I would by no means classify myself as a gamer. I just don't feel like I have enough time for that. But every so often, there are a couple of games that I want to play, want to try, so forth and so on. And there's one game that I always seem to come back to, and I talked about this one a long time ago, and it was the Mass Effect series. I've always loved that series, and it was one that I had played years ago, and I never like went all the way through it. I played all the way through the second one and then part of the third one, but never, actually finished them or whatever. So then I signed up for this service through NVIDIA, which is called the GE Force, I believe. And it's basically like distributed computing, but for gaming. So instead of you having to download every single game and overload your system to do it, really all you have to do is purchase the game through like Steam or something, and at least have the game listed as a part of your account. And provided that that game is also listed through the NVIDIA service somewhere, you can then play the game in full, because they sync your accounts together, and then you play it without actually having to download it to
The device.
your device. Steam saves your progress, so you can still save your games, still do everything like you would normally do, but you don't have to worry about keeping multiple save files on your computer and all that other kind of stuff. So that's been really cool to go through and been playing that game. But I'm noticing there are certain games that I feel like should be on there that aren't available. Like, you can get just about any game through Steam, but then it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to correspond with NVIDIA. So, like in particular, I was looking at the Call of Duty series lately. I've always liked that series. I've played a couple of games from it, but not a whole lot. I mean, if you know anything about the Call of Duty series, you know there are a lot. There are a lot of these games.
One a year, man, for the last 20
Yeah,
years or so. Yeah.
yeah. So it's and in some cases, I think there's more than just one a year because I mean they have like whole like mini series. Like the one that I was trying to find was the Modern Warfare series. Currently, they're up to three in that series, and I found two and three, but I can't find one. And then I finally found one, but it's like exclusive to Steam only. So if you're using the distributed computing, you can't play it.
Mm,
And so I went and tried to, download it onto my system, and then of course all kinds of issues popped up with that, which is why I liked the distributed computing in the first place.
right.
So it's like you got two options. You can just suck it up and not know the full story and just kind of rely on whatever recap they give you through two to understand, the whole thing. Or you can buy a whole new computer specifically designed for gaming to play all of these things and move
Are
on.
these the original Modern Warfare games or the like the redo versions? Like I know they had like the ones that were like late 20 or aughts, early teens, but then I think they like redid Modern Warfare recently. Is that
I don't know about any redo of the Modern Warfare. I do know that there are a lot of the stories that overlap. Like, from my understanding, Modern Warfare overlaps with Black Ops, and there's like six Black Ops games. And then there is the Ghost series that's in there somewhere. So yeah, I don't know the full timeline, but that's part of the reason that I became interested in the games at all because, I remember the games when they first started doing Call of Duty games. Again, like you said, some 20 years ago when they were very much, period games like this was World War II or
Mhm.
this was, Normandy or whatever the thing was. It was like specific to one particular field of battle, and then that was
Yeah.
it. And then they have since branched out. They've created their own storylines. They've got all kinds of different characters that you can follow along with. It's almost like its own, well, it is its own expanded universe there.
Mhm.
And so I just got really intrigued with trying to like go back through and play some of these games and track the development and the storyline. I couldn't go back all the way to the very first Call of Duty game because it's like awful by today's comparison.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
It would be rough for anybody, I think, unless you were
Yeah.
just a truly diehard fan. It would be really rough for you to go that far back to playing the game and
Yeah.
everything else. So,
You might remember a few weeks ago I was reading the book about D-Day, and I remember that Medal of Honor had a D-Day
Medal
scene
of
in
Honor,
it.
that's the one. That's the other game I forgot
Yeah,
about. Yeah.
I remember they had a Normandy D-Day beach sequence, and it's like it was inspired by Saving Private Ryan and all that, and it is. I went and looked it up just to like for nostalgia reasons. Oh man, it was a thing for its time, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Anybody, you should do yourself a favor. Like if you enjoy or can get any kind of enjoyment out of just watching gameplay, if you go on YouTube, there are a bunch of
Every
channels that are
single
dedicated
game.
to
Yeah.
just that, and you can watch people play these games, and they'll do just strict story mode. There's no talking. Let you just watch the game and everything else. I've done it for a few older games, and while like for some of them the story holds up really well, but the graphics, man, it's soul crushing.
Yeah.
How I mean, advanced for their time, but
Right.
terrible compared to what we can do
Yeah.
now or what can be done now. So,
Yeah.
but that's always just fascinating to look at to see just how far we've come. Like from 20 years ago, where there was no definition, everything was just hard angles and blocks and faces and weird
Yeah.
geometry
Mount
smashed
didn't
together.
move. They just were
Yeah,
still. Yeah.
yeah, and the only way you knew they were mad was because the giant block eyebrow suddenly flexed hard, like that. That was about it. But now
Yeah.
they've got close-ups, and you can see the layers of dirt on the face. You can see
Right.
the sweat beating up on the forehead, and traces of blood from a kill they made hours ago was still there.
Right.
They continuously talk about the game. Red Dead Redemption for its advanced graphics, which apparently the Rockstar Games continues to work on, tweak, and advance to keep it as fresh and up to date as possible. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of stuff that they can do now that we just was only a dream
Right.
20 years ago. So
Yeah.
um, go and just check some of that stuff out. It's just really cool, and that's again another reason why I wanted to look at this series and see how things are going. So all that to say, um I'm trying to get it worked out. I've got most of it worked out. I have not officially played anything yet. My goal is to, within the next couple of days, to do that while also doing pretty much everything else I'm doing. Basically, I'm just doing a lot of things to like just be super busy right now. It's kind of odd, like between work and workouts, I've been kind of feeling like I haven't been doing very much. So it's like, let me set myself some fun tasks and do some things. So
Right.
there's that. But we're not here to talk about all of that. We are here to talk about Chrysalis. We are 20 minutes into our episode, and I think maybe I was, stalling a little bit because I don't like this episode, as I was telling David. So, do you want me to give the recap, or do
I'll
you
give
want?
it, I guess. Yeah, if
Okay,
you don't care for, I'll do it.
no, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So this is Chrysalis. This is going to be a Dr. Bashir focused episode. Um, Dr. Bashir is called in the middle of the night to the infirmary. He had tried going out the night before, trying to catch, do something with O'Brien, but O'Brien was busy with Keiko and Dak. I'm sorry, O'Brien. I'm sorry, Odo. Excuse me, Odo and Kira are going to the Hollow Suite. So like all of his friends are out on some sort of romantic night, and so he goes home lonely. Gets called in the middle of the night. There's some admiral who wants to see him. And it turns out it's not actually an admiral. It's Jack, Lauren, and Patricia. I'm
No,
sorry,
Patrick.
Patrick. Excuse me, Patrick. Um,
No, it is Patrick.
and Patrick, they've brought Serena. These are the four uh, genetically enhanced individuals who we saw last season. After we learned that Bashir had been genetically enhanced. These are the four that he had brought to the station so he could try and help them. They bring Serena because she's the one who's mute of the group, and Bashir believes he has developed some sort of medical surgery that he thinks he could use to bring her out of her mute sort of condition. He wasn't quite ready to bring her to the station. Jack, Lauren, and Patrick have kind of jumped the gun. They've impersonated an admiral and his staff, which is a big no-no. But Bashir says, "All right, well, you guys are here," and so he goes to Cisco, gets a chewing out by Cisco, like, "Hey, these guys aren't supposed to be impersonating people. What are you doing?" And he agrees eventually to cover for Bashir. Bashir initially thinks that he has, or well, he needs O'Brien to help him with fixing up one of the devices to be able to work on a super tight, like on a like a microscopic, know, super small level, because he wants to basically force Serena's brain to work better. Apparently, her brain can process data very quickly, but her eyes and ears can't get that data to her brain fast enough. So he wants to like get her brain to expand so she can get the data she wants. It O'Brien says it can't be done, but Jack, Lauren, and Patrick somehow work up the device to make it work.
They trekify a way to make it happen.
Yeah, they checkify something, and Serena is worked on. It takes 5 days after the surgery before she actually comes out of her fugue state. But when she comes out of it, she is a very normal person, very sweet, lovely, enjoys looking around, enjoying life, can interact with Bashir in a very comfortable, relatable way. Um, Meanwhile, of course, Jack, Lauren, and Patrick still have their personality quirks. And so Bashir starts basically falling in love with Serena. He tells O'Brien later that he had always had to hide his genetic advancements that had been done to him. but he'd always fantasized about finding a woman who was also genetically enhanced so that they could relate to one another. And Serena seems to be that person. For example, when he sends Serena back to go hang out with Jack, Lauren, and Patrick, she pretends to go back to being kind of catatonic because that's come from her. Interacts with him normally. She interacts with him normally. So Bashir's her and even starts planning a trip to Raza with her. He takes her to court, and she's able to, win at the Dabo table. But his attentions to her, uh, first off, they catch O'Brien's attention. He says, "You're not supposed to date a patient." He says, "Oh, don't worry about that. I passed her off to one of the other doctors, so I'm no longer technically her doctor." But when he invites Serena to his quarters for dinner uh, one night, she ends up kind of back in her catatonic state in her room where she's just staring out into space. Um, it basically turns out that she's not ready for a relationship on that level. She was kind of overwhelming for her. So she is recovered. So she doesn't stay in that fugue state, but she's going to leave the station. And so Julian gives her one last kiss and sends her on her way. So, yeah, that's the episode. I can see why you wouldn't like this one. Uh, it
Can
was
you
certainly
can you
interesting.
see why? Can you see why? You know, just before I do my part here, what did you think of this episode? You are the first time viewer. What did you think?
Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. Faith C. Sally is the
Saley,
act.
Faith
Saley,
Saley.
excuse me, is the actress who plays Serena, and I did think she did a great job of like, when she was just her catatonic state, she looks very plain, kind of sickly. Whenever she's like that, she's able to return to that dead-eyed stare. But when she's
Mhm.
just like a normal person, look like talking very attractive. Like I can see why Bashir would fall in love with her because suddenly she goes to this very relatable, cute person. So I can see why he would fall in love with her. But the whole time, especially once he first kissed her, I was like, hold up, there is no way this is acceptable behavior from a doctor toward his patient. Like this is all
Mhm.
kinds of wrong. And
Yeah.
by the time O'Brien finally brought it up, and he brings it up casually, he's like,
Gently. He brings it
yeah,
up gently. He
well, he
should have
brings it up
smacked
gently,
him.
but he also brings it up in a "you want my opinion" type way, not a "hey, I need to sit you down and talk to you" kind of way. And Bashir's like, "Oh yeah, I already passed her off to my other like my
Just to
subordinate
make sure there
doctor."
was no conflict of interest, I made sure to get her another doctor before I'm gonna try to sleep with her.
Yeah, and we already know Bashir. He loves sleeping with women. He's a player. So on one level, I'm like, it's great to see this person come out of her shell that she was in, and you want to like see her enjoy all of life in that sense. But Bashir is not the person for that to happen with. Again, he was her doctor.
At least not right away. I mean, even
Oh
if he does
yeah,
get her a new doctor, he should have that should have been like, go out, live your life, do stuff,
yes,
and if you decide, in I don't know, a year or two, if you want to like swing back this way and see maybe if something could potentially happen, then sure, but not, oh, I did your surgery and a week later we're gonna do it. Like, no, that's not how any of this should go
yeah,
at all.
way too fast.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it just has creepy factor all over it, and it just brings this episode down for that reason.
yeah.
At no point are you like, this is an acceptable relationship. The whole time you're like, Bashir, you
But
are. I mean, let me put it this way: this woman was practically autistic, as the best example of like what she was experiencing before all this happened. And anyone who knows autistic people knows that like they have trouble with relationships. And so the idea that she went from being heavily autistic to normal and he's like bada bing bada boom is just Bashir, slow your roll, my guy. Wow. So yeah, it doesn't get much better than that. And like the Cisco scene was probably the best one because of course it's Avery Brooks giving him a dressing down, and he does a great job of it. But yeah, I can see why you didn't like this one because it's awkward as all hell. But maybe you have a different reason for also disliking it.
I do. I do. That is a part of it. That is a part of it. But this episode does a couple of things that we've talked about before that, for the sake of Bashir, I don't like. And what we've already established is that, for one, we know that Esri is at least a little bit interested in the Doctor. That was kind of hinted at when she was talking about early on when they first met, re-met, however you want to look at
Yeah.
Dax in general, that, she already finds him quite charming and told him not to flirt with her because she wouldn't really know how to handle it. This episode, what it does here for Bashir is it shows him as moving on from Jadzia, because remember, the last person that we saw him actually having a relationship with was Lita. That ended, and he hasn't been with anyone else. We haven't seen him actively pursue anyone, and it was always this kind of, he was always kind of hovering around Jadzia, and then, of course, with her marrying Worf, he was kind of just relegated to being, um, a really good friend to Jadzia. And
Right.
then we see him having, uh, officially accepting her loss and letting her go, and then she's dead and all that stuff. This is the next step in him moving on to the ultimate goal. Now he's met the perfect woman. She's just like him. She's got abilities. In some ways she even surpasses him,
Yeah.
and she fits his model. She's cute, she's smart, she's small, she's all of these nice things for him that he tends to like, in addition to having that X factor of being genetically enhanced. So
Right.
she is literally a custom built woman for, well, not literally, but she is as close to a custom built woman for him as we're going to get. And so, also, the episode just shows that he never really acknowledges her feelings until the very end. This episode is very much about him feeling lonely and isolated and wanting to have some kind of connection, and him um kind of forcing that onto her a little bit. Well, I guess force is a strong word to use there for that, but he basically uses her gratitude for what he does to her, or does for her, as a way to kind of manipulate some kind of romantic attachment out of there.
Right.
And he never should have crossed that line. As her doctor, he should have been, relieved that it worked, because again, it was a long shot to begin with. He
Right.
was using untested, sanctioned technology on
Hmm.
her. There was no guarantee that what Jack and Lauren and Patrick put together was really going to work.
Right.
He was ready to then completely upend her family dynamic. After she started to show progress, her going back with them made the most sense. She should have been going back with all of them to the institute, let her transition out of that and into a different life. He was already pushing for her to stay. He got her quarters on the station. He had signed her up with an internship. He did all of these things to quickly advance her life, and he was doing it all under the so-called justification of, oh well, we're genetically enhanced, we're better, we can do these things faster than other people. But she still hadn't experienced anything we're close to a normal traditional life in 15 years. By her own admission, she'd been with those three um, pretty much all of her formative years.
Right.
And then here he is trying to um, latch onto her in such a very intense manner. Didn't like it at all. And like I said, it becomes the necessary springboard step, because no one really checks him. Yeah, O'Brien asks a couple of questions, but it's this whole idea of self-governance and self-awareness that we're supposed to expect these people to have and to employ, and
Right.
then ultimately come to this decision of, this wasn't right, you need something different, and I'm going to let you go for the better, for both of our sakes and our enrichment. I'm going to let her go. And now we're supposed to look back and realize wise and compassionate man Bashir is, and we're just so hopeful that one, she finds whatever it is she's looking for elsewhere, but also that our good saintly doctor eventually gets um the goodness that he truly deserves because he's such a good and honorable and righteous man. But he's not. Like that's the whole point of the crux of it for me is they want us to believe that he did something noble here. Ultimately, he did something noble here, and he didn't.
Yeah,
He didn't at all. He started out doing a noble thing,
he
but then
did.
tarnished it.
Yeah,
So yeah, I don't. That's why I don't like this at all. And because there's no acknowledgement of that. If
yeah,
someone somewhere had stopped him along the way and been like, what you're doing is wrong. Not asking him, do you think you're moving a little too fast? No, to say
yeah,
point blank, what you're doing is wrong. It's creepy
yeah,
to say the least, but what you're doing is wrong.
yeah. You're
Yeah,
totally
have
right
that deeper
with
conversation. I would have appreciated that more.
yeah, you're totally right about when O'Brien brings it up. His main critique is not even that he's their doctor, but like you're going too fast. Like I know you're going too fast. And his response is like, we're genetically enhanced people, we do things fast. No, not okay, bro. Just not okay. And yeah, as Vincent said in the chat, Melora, which while you were talking, Perry, I went and looked that up because I'd forgotten about it. That was a season 2, episode 6 episode where that's the woman who her gravity is different. If I remember correctly.
On her home planet, the gravity is different. They can practically fly, and she comes to live in what we would consider normal gravity, and she's got the super weak bones and has to use the wheelchair and he fixes her then too
Right,
to a degree to make her sort of kind of normal. But
right,
I will argue that Melora did have more of an obvious attraction to him
right.
than what Serena exhibits here.
Yes, and that was a partial like his being her doctor was not a drastic like change in her personality, her
Right.
situation. It was a different type of
It
being
was
her
not the
doctor, but
reason, and it was not the reason for her being on the station. She came
right,
to the station for a totally different purpose. The
right,
whole reason Serena was there was for him to be her doctor, for
right,
him to fix her. So the relationship between Bashir and Serena doesn't compare at all because it was a direct result of the care he gave her versus Melora and his relationship was just a result of two people who happen to live on the same station and they work
right.
together. That was it. There's a completely different dynamic there.
Yeah, and he doesn't like. It's more of a technical help for her, right? Like he sets her quarters up in a way that allows for her to float around. Like
Yeah,
that's
she
not
doesn't
a
need him. She doesn't need him for anything.
right,
He comes to her later on with a procedure that's supposed to greatly enhance her ability in our normal gravity, but
right,
it's not something that she absolutely needed in order to function and communicate in the world. She was already doing that. She had a
right.
little difficulty doing it, sure, but she could do it. I mean, heck, she went through the academy. She was an officer. She
Right,
graduated. She
right,
just, had bone issues. So, and at the end of that episode, Melora still wanted to maintain some kind of relationship with him.
right,
She even brought up the idea of a long distance relationship between the two of them, which
right,
we know doesn't happen. But she at least discussed that possibility. That's not what we see here when Serena and Bashir part. It's very much as she's off to discover herself and her life
right.
and go wherever that takes her. And there's not even a hint of I may see you again someday. It's I'm just gonna go and good luck to you. And
Yeah,
this was wonderful what we had, but that's it, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. That was definitely a different situation. Not 100% different. Definitely relatable in terms of these two
Yeah.
episodes, but there were enough changes to make. Like the real point though is like Bashir's going in the wrong direction.
In
Like,
in either case, he's still kind of going in the wrong direction because even
well,
with the Melora situation, she does not start out as his patient, but she
right,
becomes his patient
right,
when he starts doing all of these things to fix her. And at
right,
that
right.
point too, he should have stopped with the whole romantic whatever because then
Yep,
he started to like pressure her to continue
that's
getting the
true.
treatments
Right,
because that was the only way they were going to be able to stay together. She started having second thoughts and he was like, well, you're just going to cut me out of your life then if we can't do this thing. And that's why she kept doing it. Abuse of his power, his
Yeah.
authority, all of it by forcing her to do something
Ugh.
she didn't want to do. Yeah, bad episode in
Yeah.
retrospect. So, and
Yeah.
this is now
At least
showing
the
our doctor has
character's
a little bit of a
consistent,
pattern.
I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know,
Wrong reason to be consistent, but hey.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
not the thing you want our people to be consistent about.
yeah, yeah. Um, trying to think, there wasn't a B plot in this episode.
No, there isn't a B plot. Not no, no, there's not.
Yeah.
Everything is related to this, but
The
there
only
are some
B-ish
things that,
plot,
yeah,
oh, I'm sorry, just that the three other, like when they get done with the Serena situation, they start contemplating the great shrinkage of the universe, which, according to Wikipedia, is called the big crunch, where I guess gravity across the universe will eventually drag all matter back into itself, or at least this is the theory. And we have no time. We have to think about this now. We have billions of years before this happens, but we need to.
quadrillions. He
Yeah,
says, yeah, the next it could happen anywhere for the next couple quadrillion billion years. Oh, okay then. So
yeah,
no rush then, Jack. Got
exactly.
it.
That's the only other thing that might be a B plot, and that's not at all a B plot. So yeah, I feel
No,
like this episode, like last episode, like it's kind of straightforward in terms of
yeah.
what happens.
Well, this episode bothers me for a lot of different reasons because when I watch it, especially as a person who has seen this uh, a few times, and I'll admit I have not watched a lot of season 7 because season 7 is the end, and I don't like the end.
Ends.
Right, but so I've seen these episodes the least of all the other ones, but I still remember certain things, and one of the things that bothers me is the fact that they were able to make it all the way from whatever station they were on onto a ship, across sectors of space, to Deep Space Nine, which is the hub of military activity for the Dominion right now, and get into the station, dismiss a doctor on staff, and no one batted an eye until Cisco found out about it.
Yeah,
Like it, the levels of incompetence that this shows in the start in Starfleet
yeah,
is astounding. Like
yeah.
you it highlights issues that I have with the continuity in Trek. On the one hand, you want me to believe that these officers represent the absolute best and brightest. They're great at their jobs. They're almost perfect at their jobs. Nothing ever goes wrong. Everybody is where they're supposed to be. The again, the ideas of self governance and self regulation are so paramount in this idealized society that there's no way somebody would be able to um, hoodwink them or impersonate officers and all this kind of stuff. And yet we see here evidence that it's incredibly easy. And we want us to be like, oh well, they try to make a joke out of it with Rom, not Rom, I'm sorry, but with Nog, and
Hmm.
oh, you couldn't tell these guys weren't real admirals or whatever. But think about it from his standpoint. He is a
Ensign.
ensign. He's a low ranking officer, again, on the space station here during a time of war. They just came off of a a ship of the line where they passed countless other officers, that captain, first officer, their whole chain of command. They were to get past all these people and get to their station from wherever it was they are coming from. He had no reason to question it because we're supposed to believe that Starfleet does its job and does its checks. And no one at any point thought to check for a Admiral Patrick somewhere.
Yeah,
Now, we could believe that Lauren and Jack were able to come up with some clever authorizations and whatever else, so it really wouldn't fall apart until somebody who legitimately knew them saw them.
right.
Sure, but come on. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
it,
it's
it
funny
just
too because
awful.
Patrick is the childlike one. We have
And yet
Jack, who's the neurotic one, and we have what's
Lauren,
her
who's the
face?
sexy one.
Yeah, she can't help but every male she comes across, she like caresses their chin as she walks by. So yeah, it as Vincent keeps pointing out in the chat, that's a stupid question. We
That, and
can
apparently that's all he said from space station to space station. All he said was, "That's a stupid question," and he let Lauren and Jack handle it. Which, you know what, may have worked, except as we see, Jack is a neurotic nut
Yes.
at
Yeah.
best. He's always twitching and this and other. There's no way him
Yeah.
standing there, someone would have been like, "Is he okay?" And even if you say, "Yeah, he's fine," or "That's a stupid question," no one thought, "Well, you know what? I know what he said, but let me run a quick scan just to see," because
Right.
the boy is not right.
Yeah.
There's just too many stops along the way where
Right.
someone, if we're to believe these people are so wonderful and so great at their jobs, no one thought to do a double check, just a cursory one,
Yeah.
just to see. Or you're departing the station. Hey, by the way, last minute, got this admiral that came aboard with his staff. Do you know anything about that? No one thought to ask. Like, come on.
There's only one thing I'll push back on, and that is that the uniforms that we've had since what season 5, they were introduced season 5.
Mhm.
They are dapper. They look great because even those three in their outfits, the admiral outfit did
Oh,
actually
that
look
the
pretty good.
admiral outfit was pretty nice. I will give
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I mean,
I
like,
love the like bracelet looking like
Ye
colors here.
oh,
Like,
I like the belt buckle. That's what I kept looking at the
yeah,
whole time, the nice brass, belt buckle
I
and
mean,
the
heck, man, you
gold
walk
trim on
around.
the uniform. Like, I get it. Like,
Yeah,
I totally get it. If the guy dresses the part and he looks all stern and whatever else, you're probably not gonna question him too much, but at the same time, I
yeah.
still feel like somebody should have been doing
Well, the
a
reason
little
I
bit more of a check.
reason I bring it up is because once Pat is back in his normal clothing, you can see his love handles return. And it's like, yep, those are the PJs I remember. Like, I didn't quite recognize the three of them when they first turn around.
Oh,
It took me
really?
a quick second, only because I looked at Patrick at first. He was the
Oh,
first
okay.
one I looked at, and he was the one who was, playing his part the most clearly. But once I saw the other two, it became pretty clear.
No.
Um, but yeah, I just have to say the outfits that they introduced in season 5 are great. So
And
I
Jack
like it.
also, he has a whole, not Jack, but Patrick also has a whole, demeanor and personality change. And even his hair changes. When he's in the uniform, he's all, again, he's stern, almost regal. His hair is slicked back and smooth and everything. And then when he takes it off, it's all mangled up and he looks all doe eyed and stuff. And it's like, they
Yeah,
did a great job of casting here for this guy because it's clear he's got a range.
yeah,
He's quite effective.
yeah. And
Um,
speaking of them, the one scene that I guess we haven't mentioned yet was the scene where they start singing
that was
Do
next.
Ra
Do re
Ma
mi.
Fa. Yeah, Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Di Do. I don't know all the words, but um, I thought it was
Yeah.
fun. It was a little drawn out. Unfortunately, I feel like that's an example of this episode didn't have a B story, so they had to fill in it a bit actually.
Yeah.
Because that scene went on for a few minutes. It was fun in the sense of like here are some people who have some mental blockages, and especially um, what's her face, Serena
Serena.
is the one who is now out of it. She's the one who was mute before, and now not only is she like she starts off sounding like a mute when she talks, and she's talked more normally, and that scene is where she learns about like
Mhm.
intonation and tone. So that was fun to watch. Apparently, according to the Wikipedia entry here, the guy who plays Jack is not a singer, and so he had to have someone dub his parts, and everyone else dubbed their own parts in post. But um, yeah, it was a fun scene, but definitely an example of we needed to fill in this episode to make it
Yeah.
fit the
Well,
runtime.
I always took that scene as probably one of the nicer scenes of the episode because to me it was the um Serena is their missing note. So she kind
Yes,
of fills that in when she comes back and they see that she can now talk. She lends her voice to their chorus that they were,
right.
beforehand. So um yeah, she's the melody there. So and she carries it, and that's kind of the whole point,
Hmm.
highlighting just how, truly unique and special she is by being able to get them to, carry on in such a manner, but also to stand out on our own as well. So I do agree though, bit long of a scene, bit
Yeah,
long, but I did enjoy that part.
yeah,
Um, I also enjoyed Cisco in his little bit there where he was just like, they're impersonating officers. Like he's the only one who showed at least a little bit of the right amount of outrage, you know?
Yes.
And he's like, they're going like I wish he would have said it. They're going to jail. Like I don't care what you say. We let them slide last time when they tried to like trade in all of the military secrets. We gave them a pass on that one, but this one we can't. We just can't do it anymore, Doctor. They're going to jail. Serena
Now,
can stay because she's a mutant. She didn't have any part in it. But
that
those three,
also
jail. Go to jail.
that also reveals as a part of the whole impersonating officers bit is like how did they get away from the people they were supposed to be in custody of in the first place and
Again,
the
that's what
whole
I'm
time?
saying. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. Even if if the other three were walking and they're in uniform, we saw they didn't put Serena in a uniform. So if they're all walking and then she's the fourth with them, someone would have been like, "Hey, Admiral, who's that freak behind you right there that you're dragging in tow? Like, what's going on here?" Again,
right.
something that should have raised more flags than it did. And so if I was Cisco, as soon as I saw that, like I said, I mean, again, he showed the proper amount of outrage. He should have immediately been contacting what ship they said they came off of, the Farragut ship. I'd have been contacting that officer and every admiral in the chain of command and been like, this guy needs to be demoted immediately. He is not the captain anymore of that ship.
Yeah, if we're
Get
watching
him
out
off
for
there.
changelings this whole
Yeah.
time.
And this man just let four people on board his ship and order him across several sectors to the heart of Dominion ops here.
Oh
And he
man,
just brought him right to our doorstep.
this is
Like,
the problem with examining episodes is we start
yeah,
tearing it down so much that it doesn't even make sense anymore.
I'm just saying, like, no one really thought this. Like, the real story is the colossal failure of the chain of command in Starfleet. That's what this episode should be about.
Oh man.
And the only person who seems to have any kind of sense of outrage for this is Cisco, the man at the end of the line here, and he should have immediately been like, "I'm sorry, dude. I'm gonna need you to turn in your pips like right now. Turn that ship around and come back. You are no longer in command. You just let four officers come through, and they're just on your ship. Did you even check what records they accessed, what they were doing? Nothing. They just got
Yeah.
our whole battle plan from your data banks, and you're just what
Well,
are you doing?"
again, as I think about it even more, we know that there's the surgery where you can make yourself look like an alien species. So we know the Cardassians did it for the Bajorans with that episode where Kira went back to
Hmm.
Cardassia because they said that she was actually one of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, it is totally plausible that someone has tried impersonating a human officer and it was not a changeling.
No, you don't even have to be a changeling to do it. Like that's what I'm saying. Like we're supposed to believe that the Federation,
Oh
it's
man.
like it's rare that someone is able to make it to infiltrate the Federation and to do it at such a highly successful level. That's
Right.
what they want us to believe because every time that anyone's ever attempted it, we've seen them get caught. Worf catches them on his off day on the Enterprise. So, I mean, come on, you would think that a space station or Earth itself would have better security, but I mean, who knows? They're just letting people just come on in and do whatever and order everybody around, and no one's making any questions about anything. So yeah,
Yeah.
that whole sequence of events was just like I need uh, several steps of examining uh, uh, chain of command, verification of command, like checks and balances. Something. There's got to be a better way that this could be executed than what we actually see or are led to believe. So
Right. Yeah. And Vincent pointed out that episode I just mentioned is Second Skin from season 3, I think episode 5. Yeah, yeah, that's the episode where we learn that Ananda Visitor did not
mhm.
like being under that much prosthetic makeup, apparently.
Yes, she was claustrophobic and did not enjoy the Cardassian makeup, which is just such a fitting thing to hear that she really just didn't like being a Cardassian.
Yeah.
Of course not. Of course you didn't. Of course you didn't. And
You've been a
we
secret
knew that.
Cardassian yearn this whole
Mm,
time. What?
well,
That's
right.
not true.
She's ready to kill herself over that assumption. So.
Oh man, interesting ploy. Uh,
Now, another thing that we should talk about is the dinner scene itself. So this is where Dr. Bashir takes Serena to meet with Esri, O'Brien, Kira, and Odo, and they're supposed to be having dinner, but I noticed no one orders, no one eats. They don't even have any drinks. They're just kind of sitting there, you know.
Well, Bashir
So
says round on me or something, but
yeah, but we never actually see it. So did
fair
they
enough.
drink? Hmm. So there is that. Um, in that scene, we see the very quick, but also, or no, after that scene. Wait, no, it was during that scene. I'm getting things out of order here. It was during that scene where Serena accurately breaks down everybody in the room, what they're about.
Hmm.
Esri needs to have more self-confidence. O'Brien needs to admit that he and Julian are best friends. Kira thinks that Odo doesn't express himself, but clearly he does. And she's so impressed with how strong-willed Kira is. And again, she gives all these astute observations of our people. I don't like it. Again, it's one of those tropes that we're supposed to take to show that this individual is really very advanced, very adept.
Hmm.
Again, to highlight the name of the episode, Chrysalis here, the butterfly has emerged from the cocoon and is in full regalia here, and
Right.
I thought that it was a little too on the nose for any of this. You barely had a conversation, a conversation we didn't see. You've barely had a conversation with these people, and yet you're able to tell their most intimate whatever's about them, and we're supposed to just take that as gospel. She then reads, Bashir a little bit towards the end, or after their dinner, of course, and she listed him as compassionate, something else, and lonely. And I was like, you could throw another one in there, horny. Like throw that on there because that's really what he was. You probably should have led with that one because that's his whole thing in this episode.
Right.
But yeah, I just don't like that. It was just a little too contrived for me. I don't like that they gave her all of these, abilities, I guess. Like stick to math. All right. I can handle that. But now you're just trying to make her everything. And I
Yeah.
just yeah.
Yeah. She does eclipse even Bashir eventually with all of her abilities.
Yeah.
Uh, I when this episode started and it was a Bashir focused episode, part of me was like, okay, it's been a while since we had a Bashir focused episode,
It has been.
and
It has
he's
been.
he's a character who has experienced the most growth, arguably, as one of the more immature characters to start.
I would
He
okay. I'd give him. I would say he's the most changed. I don't know if he's grown really.
Fair enough. Point being is that of all the characters, he's the one who is the most different from what he started as, even if we're going to argue that he hasn't actually learned anything. But yeah, this man, it's just a bummer that it didn't seem to go quite as well as it should have. And you're right about bringing up Esri, of like, she's already the one who said that he's a charming person that she'd have a hard time dealing with. And then to have this other character, again, this former mute kind of autistic person, suddenly, hey, I'm now your,
I'm ready made for you, and yet
yeah,
ultimately it doesn't work out. So that the lesson that we learn here for Bashir is you don't really need a genetically enhanced person to be your partner. You need
right,
somebody else who's just more alert and in tune with feelings. And who do we know who's like that already?
yeah,
Like that's the route I feel like this is going. And as we move through other things, I think that we will see, that I'm right. So
right,
it's just like things like that bother me. Like, I said the same thing kind of about Odo when we watched Odo's development, and we knew for a long time about his interest in Kira, but he had to have several different growth spurts basically before he was ready to be with Kira.
right,
He had to solve kind of the mystery of his past, and he had to be more informed about himself. He had to have his first time with someone, and then and both he then had to um, kind of betray and re-earn Kira's affection and attention now as the fully formed man versus the more virginal version of himself that we saw um, up to a certain point.
right,
So I like these kind of the way they frame almost like this, like you got to know the world first before you can finally, be done and have this kind of settled in love situation.
Right.
And I feel like they're doing the same thing for Bashir here.
Right. Yeah, I want to say with Vincent. Vincent says that Kira has had the most growth. That's true. Kira has had the most mature growth, but
Yeah.
Bashir, I feel, is the one like comparing him from season one to now. I feel like he's the most different, like changed, as we just
I
said.
will, yeah, I will give you that. He started off the boyish, young, naive doctor who insults people without really meaning to,
Right.
and then he changes into this more, you know, compassionate, mature figure to a certain degree,
But he's still got an
But
arrogance to him. Yeah.
yes, but he's still very arrogant. He's still very, deeply, deeply believing in his own abilities. Again, to that point of arrogance and so forth. So yeah, Kira is definitely. I feel like she definitely has the most growth. Going from that angry officer we saw the very first episode in what would become Cisco's office to
Hmm.
who she is now, and in such a solid relationship with Odo, and the way that those two really kind of complement each other. You can't even really look at them and say who's doing the most in the way of like heavy lifting in their relationship because they work so well together. And we've watched that development. We watched them when they were just friends, then when they started to kind of cross that line to when they finally did, to the whole issue with the female changeling when she was there and influencing him and how that made Kira feel, downfall of her relationship with Shakar and Barial and Odo standing by her on all those things. I mean, like, yeah, those two have definitely done a great job of showing an outgrowth into a very stable, steady relationship. And Kira, in particular, has always been um, very strong in that. So yeah, I definitely agree. Um, we've got some more coming from the character that I think everyone universally agrees shows the most growth and development in this series. Haven't quite gotten back to this character yet, but it's coming. So I'm not going to spoil it with who it is. So
Okay.
we'll get
All
there.
right.
We'll get there.
Gotcha.
Well, I think that's going to really do it for us on this episode. We're going to wrap this one up pretty close to that hour mark. Any final thoughts on Chrysalis and Serena and Patrick and Lauren and Jack and Bashir here?
Uh, no, I guess we've said it all. Again, Avery Brooks' scene was as Cisco. I think just was the standout scene because he's always the best actor. Um, just him chewing down Bashir was just fantastic. Chewing out Bashir, I should say. Trying to think if there's anything else we missed. There's something like the back of my brain. I feel like there's a scene we didn't talk about, but I can't think of it. So yeah.
We could always sit and talk about how Lauren was ready to just consume Nog. She became instantly obsessed with Nog and was like, "Yeah, he's her man now." She was already saying she was involved.
Yeah.
It was a thing. So
Yeah, I feel like she moves on quickly. So let
her
the
heart, her heart doesn't stay broken for long. Is that what you're
yeah,
trying to say?
it's more about what's currently in front of her face. So just let someone else be dragged across her line of sight, and poor Nog will be let go. But she does caress that picture of him, and it's
Oh
just
yeah,
like he's still a kid, right? I think he's still a kid. I don't know
yeah.
by
He's
now,
like,
but
well, I don't know. I think you have to be 18 to be accepted into Starfleet Academy,
right,
and then and he's already graduated. He's an ensign now. At the oldest, he's 20,
yeah,
maybe 21. Well, no, so he was
that probably makes
18.
more sense.
I'd say he's probably about 22 because he was 18, and then we lost track of him for at least 2 to 3 years. We didn't see him, and now he's back and he's on the station. So I'm going to say he's at least 21. I think
Okay,
that's fair at
all
this
right.
point.
So
Yeah.
he's mature enough then. Fine. Yeah, I guess if Jake Sisko is an adult by now, Nog is too. So, all right, all right.
Well, real
Still
quick,
feels a
re-
little messed up, but
yeah. Well, real quick before we close this out, Vincent asked the question: Who wins in a fight, the USS Voyager or the USS Valiant, manned by Red Squad? In the words of Admiral Patrick, that's a stupid question. All right,
Yeah, Vincent.
Voyager clearly wins. Voyager clearly wins.
I was gonna say I
You've
feel like it would win, but like barely, like just like just like limping along by the end.
it's got the muscle with its weapons and so forth, but Red Squad they lack any kind of experience. And the
Right.
simple fact that the chief of security and tactical officer is a what is he, a 102-year-old Vulcan who taught military tactics at Starfleet Academy for 50 years, they're not gonna win.
Oh, really?
They're
Is
just
that
not gonna win.
the head of security on Voyager? He's been around for that long, and he taught.
Yes.
Interesting.
He taught survivalist and military tactics at Starfleet Academy for several years, and then he like semi-retired, and then he came back, and he's been in
On
Starfleet
Voyager.
ever since, and now he's on Voyager. So
Ah.
yeah, you're not sneaking one past Tuvok. He would take that ship out in a heartbeat. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's a silly question there.
Actually, while I'm thinking about it, this just brings up for me, like, if Spock was the second in command
Hmm.
of the Enterprise on the original show, but
Hmm.
he was supposed to also be the science officer, right? Wasn't he also the science officer?
He was the chief science officer. Yes.
So how did that work back then? Is that supposed to be something like the dedicated second in command? It was a relatively new thing of, we don't have
So,
a
like, are you asking if the second in command was also going to be like a serving officer in another
like
position?
yeah, so like on TNG, Riker is like the dedicated number one, number two on the ship.
Yeah,
He doesn't
but
have
he
a
doesn't do anything else. He's not like
right,
also chief of engineering.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Is that
You know what?
new
I don't
too?
know if they ever really give an explanation for that. I always took it as with Spock and Kirk and all them. Spock entered Starfleet because of the sciences,
Mhm.
and then through that he ultimately ends up earning his commission, and he's fast tracked officer, and he becomes they keep calling him, even in the original series, he's supposedly the finest first officer in Starfleet.
Right.
So I just always took it as a person who's achieved that level of status, and because of the way they structured things back then, he just got his choice as to what he wanted to be doing on the
So he
ship.
was
You
first
know,
officer, but he also was allowed to also be.
right? Because
That
he's
makes
because
sense.
he had such a great aptitude for it. No one could beat him. Like that's always been the thing about Spock. He wasn't just a scientist; he was the scientist.
Right.
Everybody wanted Spock on their ship because he was just that good.
Right.
And so yeah, it's just like, yeah, he's gonna get to do whatever he wants. And even and you kind of see evidence of that, like when they do the movie, the first movie, the motion picture. Spock has retired from Starfleet. His commission is inactive, and he comes back to the Enterprise at a critical moment, and they just immediately adjust the entire structure to fit him in as chief science officer because he's
Gotcha.
just that good.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah, Riker was the head of the away missions department. Nice,
So
Vincent.
I mean, but that's actually an interesting point because we do see a shift in Next Generation where the captain no longer goes on all the away missions, which is what we
Yeah.
had in the original series. The
Right.
captain, the first officer, and the doctor always went, or
Right.
really, the captain, the chief science officer, and the chief medical officer always went.
Right.
In the Next Generation, Picard stayed home to supervise, and Riker acted as like basically de facto ambassador.
Right.
And so then he would make that first contact, and if things went well, then Captain Picard would come down, and then you got to meet, kind of like he was like, what do they call him, you got the prime minister, and then you got the deputy prime minister. So Riker would be that with
Right.
the staff.
Gotcha. Well, let's follow up with to Vincent's question about Voyager versus Valiant. If the Voyager would have won against the Valiant, would the Voyager stand a chance against Cisco's Defiant?
No, not a chance. Not a chance at all.
Clear answers both
No,
times. All right,
I'm
go
telling
ahead.
you, experience trumps all. And The simple fact is, I feel like Cisco is a far more aggressive captain than Janeway is,
Right.
and between the fact that you've got Cisco, Kira, and Worf all on the same ship, they and then considering the weapons and the abilities of the Defiant itself, Voyager doesn't stand a chance. Voyager could keep up, and if they like started to like have to do some like high speed stuff,
Right.
Voyager might outpace them, but the Defiant is too small, too maneuverable, and too powerful.
Right.
With an experienced crew, there's no way the Defiant loses.
So Valiant would be full of inexperienced bluster from a bunch of kids. The Voyager would have experience, but primarily through one officer, and the Defiant would have multiple experienced officers, and they could make aggressive but tactically wise decisions against
Right,
the Voyager.
right.
Gotcha.
Captain Janeway was a scientist first, and that's always been, part of her thing. She was a scientist first, and she gradually learned how to do other things like military strategy and so forth. Cisco, on the other hand, was always a tactical officer. He took a brief hiatus when he designed ships. When he went to the Utopia Planitia shipyards, but even then, the ship he designed was the Defiant. No one
Right.
knows the ship better than Cisco. Then you have Worf, who is an accomplished security and tactical officer. He's also the military strategist for all of the sector of the Bajoran sector. And then you have Kira, who's been fighting, war since she could pick up a phaser by her own admission. You've got Miles O'Brien, who is a decorated non-com who's fought in several wars and engagements and conflicts, in particular with Cardassians. And then you've got, well, you did have Jadzia Dax, who had lived 7, 8 lifetimes and was an accomplished scientist in her own right. The crew of the Defiant trumps all of what Voyager's got going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Vincent, there's your answer. That was the official designation of Star Trek lore itself. So,
Yeah. And you know what? I like that question. I will debate these kinds of things forever. Um just before you even ask, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you the Enterprise wins against Voyager only because of its size. That's it. Picard is a little too
but
slow.
but versus the Defiant,
The Defiant is highly maneuverable. Um, it would depend on when they're fighting, I guess, because the Enterprise gets several upgrades.
yeah,
So depends on when they're fighting and if Worf is there or not. Are we talking about TNG Wharf or First Contact Wharf? There's a difference. So we
gotcha.
can talk about those later because we'll be here all night debating who's
And
gonna
how
who's
is
gonna do
Worf
what.
on which side? Is he fighting against himself?
See, and that's right, exactly. Are we dealing with a weird universe where there's two Wharves and we've got young
For the
TNG
sake of
Wharf
argument,
in one?
yes. Yes,
You
for the
know,
sake of argument, yes.
well then I feel like that's another reason that the Enterprise loses because Worf on the Defiant is
Would
older and
know
more experienced.
everything about
Knows,
the
yes. So, and he would know how that Worf operated and could take him out.
boom.
Julian and Serena end up together in the non-canon books. You answered your own again stupid question. It's a non-canon book. No, no. Right? Done. You're gonna keep asking me these questions. I'm gonna have to get you like a card that's just a picture of Admiral Patrick and just send it to you every time. Like every time you want to ask, here, just take a look. Because no.
Keep him coming. Keep him coming. Oh man.
Well, all right, guys. Actually, I think that's going to do it for us on this episode. We'll be back to bash the ships, the crews, and everybody else in between on our next week's episode. No new Trek updates as of yet, and yeah, until next time, guys. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.